I'll press the I've got the got it box to approve. Shall I click that? Yeah.
However you like.
Yeah, I've managed to click the right one.
Done. We are live.
Excellent.
Yes, we are live. Hello, everyone. Welcome to my channel. It's my first live stream, and I'm having Victor Olliver'ı today.
Hello there, Shira. I think we sorted the pronunciation of your name out.
Yeah.
Speaking Shira. It's a great honor to be on your first live stream, and it's a huge pleasure.
It's my pleasure, actually, because I'm really thankful for accepting my invitation and giving me the chance to host you here. Thank you for joining me.
A great pleasure. I'm in Lancing in Great Britain on the coast. The house is virtually on the beach. So Neptune is very, very close to me.
Yeah, and I think you have also known as the beach bum astrologer.
Oh, you're clever. You're very clever. I keep wondering whether to start a magazine called The Beach Bum Astrologer. What do you think?
I will write for it.
We'll give you a column. How's that?
Yeah.
But of course, I'm a terrible self-promoter, by the way, so you'll have to shut me up. But this is the latest issue of the Astrological Journal that I edit.
Yeah.
So that's
amazing.
in case the world wants to. Oh.
Okay, that's great.
Okay.
Let me introduce you as the editor of Astrological Journal and author and many, many other things. Actually, you have very quite interesting CV before you became an astrologer, actually.
Well, I was actually legally trained. I was supposed to be a lawyer, but then I decided that I didn't care for the architecture at the courts. So I became a journalist and an editor. So for many decades, because I'm an extremely old person now, virtually a fossil. And I sort of worked for newspapers and magazines. I worked for fashion magazines. So yeah, lots of things. So I've been able to bring my skills to the Astrological Journal. And also it's useful to turn my writing to astrology.
Yeah, it's amazing CV for me, actually. Because when you experience different life paths, you have a different vision.
I think so, because you bring so much of other worlds to the world. I mean, astrology is a very odd world, isn't it?
Definitely.
And we won't go there. I won't say too much about that. But it seems like a small world, but it's actually a lot bigger than people assume. And within it, there are so many different perspectives and traditions and techniques. And of course, the technique that we're going to talk about tonight goes back to about the 2nd millennium BC.
Yep. I think you need to explain us the origins of the Draconic zodiac that we will talk about.
Well, Draconic, oh, by the way, just in case, self-promoting the book. I will be sharing some charts if we can do that. But basically, Draconic is, we think is an ancient system, but there is some mystery about whether, in fact, the Babylonians, the Mesopotamians actually practiced Draconic astrology. It could also be called nodal astrology. We do know that the Babylonians understood what the nodes were. Yeah. And just to explain very quickly, Draconic is all about how we deal with the nodal axis, or the south node and the north node. I know you know all this, but a lot of people probably won't. And if you want to know in one line, what is the point of Draconic astrology? Well, it's to get to the essence of something. And you can do it in many different systems, but for natal astrology, you're looking to find the sole purpose.
Which
and
is
we
very
all ask
important.
the question, don't we? We all ask the question, why are we here? What are we? And
exactly.
It's not just about, oh, I want to be a lawyer, I want to be this, that, and the other. That may be relevant, but because you can look at the midheaven for that sort of thing. So creating the Draconic chart and doing that is so easy that some astrologers sort of think, oh, it's so easy. It's not worth bothering with. It's so easy because they're looking for complexity. You know, did Manilius know about it? So if you want to set yourself a challenge with Draconic, and I'll explain what the word means in a minute, the challenge lies in the interpretation of these higher consciousness charts, because the Draconic chart is not an alternative to the normal horoscope or tropical chart or the sidereal. But Draconic, what does it mean? It means dragon-like, and that goes back to the days of the Babylonians, who understood the nodal axis but associated it with a dragon. And they tried to explain the occultations and the eclipses and all that, and they dreamt up dragons. Why not?
On devouring the moon.
Yes.
My special area of interest is Babylonian calendar.
Yes. I mean, it's a huge subject. And if you think of the south node, that's the tail of the dragon. And then if you go to the north node, that's the dragon's head. And so that, in other words, to bring it down to an understandable level, the nodal axis describes the narrative of our life. It's like the story arc, if you like. That's the starting point for it. But people will be saying, but how do you do the Draconic chart? And
is it mysterious?
I don't think
it's not a mystery for me, but I'm asking you.
Well, I think you could do this interview by yourself, actually. I think you know it all. But
for me, it's easy because even I can calculate it from my head, because I have Sun conjunct North Node. So
you can't fail, can you? But we are people going to be looking at Shira's chart, and I've been very circumspect. I blocked all the birth dates, although you asked me not to, but I thought it's best. But where were we? I've forgotten.
How to calculate the chart?
It's very easy.
What's the logic behind it?
There are two ways of doing it. There are two ways of doing it. You can press a button, or you can get your calculator out. It's up to you. So you can press a button. You can go to Astrodance, astro.com, or Solarfire, whichever program you use, and you just draw up your tropical chart or sidereal chart, whichever it is, and then you find the Draconic option in the chart or the zodiac menu.
Yeah.
You press Draconic and hey presto, you've got it. And a lot of people say, well, what's all the fuss about? But of course, it's always good to understand, well, how did that Draconic chart get calculated? And so what we're doing, you take the North Node in its wherever it is, and you then reposition it to the vernal equinox point or 0 degrees Aries. And so where the planets are in relation to the tropical depends on the distance in degrees between your natal North Node and 0 degrees Aries. So if it's 60 degrees difference, all the planets and points will have moved by 60 degrees. Although, of course, the planets stay in their designated houses.
Doesn't matter which house system you use, it will be staying the same.
I always use equal, but you'll find people who will fight to the death for whole signs, and they'll kill people over Placidus.
Our people.
Maybe Reggio Monte. I mean, there's been a big row recently between Chris Brennan. I don't know whether people know Chris Brennan and the great Deborah Halding.
Yeah.
She's a fabulous. I mean, they're both fabulous astrologers, but to lock horns over such a subject, you know. But
I heard the debate.
Which takes us back to our first point about the wonderful world of astrology.
Yeah, I think these debates are great for functioning.
It shows there's a lot of passion around, and of course one of the biggest things that happened in the last 20 or 30 years is the recovery of all these traditional techniques, and they're both arch traditionalists. Although I will say that Deborah is showing signs of at least acknowledging the existence of the outer planets. I don't know where, I think Chris Brennan actually does too. He's quite remarkably flexible.
I think so.
Not rulerships, but they will, I mean, I know a traditional astrologer who doesn't even recognize Uranus or Neptune or Pluto. But when life is going wrong, she'll say, oh, I bet Uranus is on my sun.
But they're already discovered at the moment that we can track their movements, so we can just add it to our charts. This is what I believe.
Yes, I mean, when you're a practicing astrologer, it's second nature to do. And we've just explained to build up a draconic chart. It's very simple. But as I say, what have we actually created then? So we've actually created a moon-based chart. It's not a sun-based chart. The tropical is a sun-based chart. So what does it mean when you say moon? So you've got to go back to the actual associations with the moon, with memory, with nurturing, with the past, you know, that comes into it. And there's lots of associations with the moon that we will all recognize. And somehow that affects the interpretation of the symbols in the Draconic chart. So if you're looking at Venus, you're not just looking at partnership issues or anything like that, but also the higher vibration of it, where perhaps we move beyond just the partnership question and come up with a more cosmic sense. And this is not woo-woo stuff. This is not hyper spiritual stuff. It's actually trying to tap, why are we here? And I'll tell you something, Shira. What's interesting, most of my clients are now Draconic clients. Mm-hmm. And their usual reaction to my reports are, how did you know this? And I don't know them. I don't know them, you see. It's all
and you
blind.
Don't face-to-face consultations, right?
I do the odd Zoom. The reason why I'm reluctant to do Zoom consultations is because maybe by nature, I like to be thorough. And in a conversation, you slip. And afterwards, when you switch it off, you think, oh dear, I didn't tell him about the algol. I didn't tell him about whatever, you know. Whereas in a report, I go through it very thoroughly. But I've told other astrologers how I work, and they all despair. You know, they say, oh yeah, we all went through that phase. And then you realize you'll wear yourself out, Victor, you know.
But you're an author and editor, so I think you're normal.
What do you do? Do you consult on? Do you do consulting?
Yeah, I'm consulting astrologer. Yeah, at the moment.
On Zoom.
Yeah, Skype.
Oh, Skype! I gave up on Skype years ago.
You left it for like when it switched from MSN to Skype, maybe.
Well, Skype. Don't get me to. We won't talk about Skype.
Anyway, if we go back to the 0 point areas, that I'd like to ask something. Normally, the 0 path areas, the sun's path, 0 areas that for our tropical zodiac, that we know that it's spring.
In the northern hemisphere, yes, yes. Of course, the northern hemisphere also dominates southern hemisphere.
Yeah.
So that's another row. We won't go there. That's another big row, people. You know, because a lot of the people in Australia now want to reverse all that.
Yeah, maybe they should.
But what you said is quite right. The sun in the tropical starts the zodiac at 0 degrees Aries. So what you've got with the North Node being at 0 degrees Aries is the moon's version of the zodiac. And the thing to understand, and you'll know this, is that the Draconic zodiac is not the sidereal or tropical zodiac. It is actually a separate zodiac, which therefore brings in this extremely heavy book, which you must have. Now, to give you an example, and since you know it all, Shira, I'm going to talk to the public for a moment. Mm-hmm. I mean, we all know that the other day Pluto ingressed Capricorn.
Yeah.
And of course, it's only going to be there for a few weeks, and then it goes back into, it ingressed Aquarius.
And
then in June, it goes back to Capricorn. Mm-hmm. And in fact, that's going to go on until the end of 2024. But the point I wanted to make was on that day, the Draconic Pluto was actually at 25 degrees Sagittarius, which is very close to the galactic center.
Yeah.
And I understand that may have some resonance with your chart.
Okay. My tropical chart, heavily dominated with Capricorn. I'm quite Capricorn. I'm quite Saturnian. I hold the Saturnian qualities. However, it's in my tropical chart, it's I have no fire energy at all.
No fire energy in the tropical chart?
Yeah.
But?
However, I'm very fiery.
That's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah.
because if we look at, I've got two sort of charts. There's your chart, and because one of the things I sort of pioneered in this book is the 3-step process.
Yeah.
And it culminates in what I call the synastry of the self, where you're comparing the tropical with the draconic and all that stuff. So we've got Queen Elizabeth's chart, and then we've got your chart. And we can start with you if you like.
Is there any resemblance? Maybe from past life?
There is actually. There is some. I mean, she was Taurus, of course, but Capricorn rising too. But she was quite on the side. She was quite mischievous, the Queen, you know. And I don't see a lot of mischief in your chart, if I'm going to be honest with you. Mm-hmm. Although there is the Piscean element, which is interesting. Which
I got shocked when I see all these Pisces energy. I said, oh, okay, that's interesting. That's why I'm...
Well, it's very interesting looking at your chart, because yours, to my mind, is one of the more straightforward charts. I mean, it seems to be very emphatic. I mean, you've got all that cardinal energy. I mean, we'll look at the charts in a moment so people can share in this wonderful knowledge that we have. And also it gives me a chance, because we're not just talking about planets, we're also talking about modalities, we're talking about elements and all, I mean, quadrants, hemispheric balance, you know, a lot of your
this is my approach as well.
Side, you know, so you're quite self-contained. You're going to have a lot of faith in yourself, actually. And a lot of what arises as inspiration will come from you. You won't necessarily be consulting with people about whether you've got their approval or not.
Yeah.
And as we go through the draconic process, there's actually quite a lot of controversy in your chart, actually. Although I suspect that will come to the fore as you get a little older.
I changed a lot.
But you mentioned the fire thing. When I show the charts in a moment, I'll be able to demonstrate to people what we mean by that. Yeah. So it's up to you. Do you want to talk a bit more about Draconic, or do you want to go to the charts?
I think we should talk about Draconic ephemeris a bit more.
Yes. Well, the thing to understand, of course, is that the speed of the planets are not like the tropical. So if we understand that the nodal return happens every approximately 18.5 years. But in the Draconic system, those years are converted to months. So the slowest of the planets, of course, is dear old Pluto, which I'm sure any minute now will be promoted back to being a planet, people. It is not a dwarf planet. It has its own system. But I won't go there. But the point I wanted to make is that whereas...
That's another debate.
That's another debate that we can kill each other about. But although I noticed, by the way, that a lot of scientists are now campaigning to have Pluto restored as a planet.
I think we should recognize Pluto as a planet.
I mean, when you look at that, I mean, I'll just say this. I was looking at a documentary the other day. And isn't it strange? It's often described as the higher part of Mars, isn't it? The higher vibration.
Yeah.
Isn't it strange? They're both reddish planets, just by chance. It's just a weird thing. Just as Uranus is really spinning on its side. I mean, another weirdo planet. But it matches the weirdo planet.
Totally weirdo.
But we're not talking about that. We're talking about the speed of the draconic planets. So there's quite a complicated maths that we don't need to understand today about that. But we do know that draconic Pluto will spend a maximum of, say, 18 months in a sign, approximately. Whereas we know that in the tropical system, Pluto can be in a sign for 15, 16 years. So everything is moving really a lot quicker in the draconic chart. And I'll give you another, it's quite interesting, this. You know, I don't know whether you've ever looked at the coronavirus chart.
Yeah.
But isn't it? I remember saying, because actually the Capricorn stellium rather resembles your natal chart, may I say?
Yeah.
Massive for wooing.
I'm viral.
I'm not suggesting that you're the coronavirus or anything like that, but it's remarkable. But I don't know whether you thought this, Shira, but if you think about it, the pandemic came very fast, didn't it? From nowhere. Yeah. And it spread around the world so quickly. And I said to friends, I said, where's Uranus here? Where is Uranus? You know, and then one day I was doing my draconic analysis, and there it was. When you do the draconic chart, Draconic Uranus is actually in Capricorn and hitting that stellium.
Yep.
And that's the sort of thing that Draconic does. I'm going slightly off topic. I'll come back to the mechanics in a minute. But it's not so much, you may not agree with me with this, but I'm always looking for the headline news in Draconic. I'm looking for the big picture. So I try to avoid microanalysis if I can.
I agree.
Oh, I was expecting you to argue with me. Taking the wind out of my sails. But so now there is a complex maths, which I have bothered to learn, but I mean, you really don't want to kill your audience with boredom. But there is almost like a synthesis going on between the tropical speeds of the planets and then connecting it to the actual speeds of the nodes themselves, which of course are always moving retrograde, although there are slight variations between true and mean. I mean, I'm a believer in the true. I don't know what system you use.
Believer of what? I couldn't hear.
I'm the true. I do the true node.
Yeah.
It goes backwards and forwards a little bit.
Yes, exactly. I use true node as well.
Rather like Pam Crane then, and you know, because she was right. She's the one who's really formulated modern Draconic astrology. And so retrograde, that's another thing that fools a lot of student astrologers.
Yeah.
You know, often catch them out on that one. And what else do we need to know? So
it's really changed the when you convert it to Draconic zodiac, it changed the chart, the degrees.
Yes, they will be in different degrees. They will be in the assigned houses, of course, as we said, but they will be on different degrees. And I mean, the three-step process, as I've said, is you start with the tropical. And the big mistake I've noticed that a lot of Draconic astrologers make is they treat the tropical and the Draconic as alternatives to each other. I'm sure you've come across people who say, I'm a Gemini, but I'm Draconic Capricorn. And I've always felt that I'm Draconic Capricorn. Well, this is called
you can't even imagine
self-dramatization.
What I came across.
Well, you've given me some interesting insights. And we don't want to embarrass anybody, do we? Although the word Walter Mitty comes to mind. So you start with the tropical, you then examine the Draconic, and you're looking at the elemental balances. So let's take you for an example. In your tropical, you have no fire. But that to me, I mean, we will have our differences at some point. That to me makes it the most important element, you see, because it's the one thing you've got to work on. So it becomes the most important thing. And then when you look at the Draconic chart, suddenly it's the top element.
Yeah.
It's the top element. And there's a fair amount of earth there, I think, from memory. But, you know, the fire, in other words, what that's telling me is that one of your life purposes is to work with your passion and inspiration and to have that faith.
Yeah.
Now,
I found that.
Sorry?
I found that faith at 33 years old.
Well, it's never too late, is it?
Yeah.
Some people at 83 haven't found it. But obviously, when you're giving an analysis to somebody, you won't necessarily know where they are in their personal evolution. So in your case, it would have surprised me if you said to me, oh, I've not found my passion yet. And of course, there's a very interesting alignment, which we'll look at shortly, which points to astrology as being part of that story.
Okay, I'm excited.
And it's one of the things, I mean, a lot of people will be saying, oh, God, you know, it still sounds a bit airy-fairy. But I can tell you that during the lockdown, I was inundated with people asking me for a Draconic analysis because they had time to think about their lives.
Yeah.
They weren't on a train anymore. They weren't getting bored to death in their offices. And they suddenly had this, how do I change my life? How do I get in touch with myself? So Draconic is and I say this to all practicing astrologers, you're missing a trick by not looking at the Draconic chart, but you've got to do it right because it's not an alternative to the vernal chart.
Yeah, exactly. I think during pandemic, we remember that we are earthlings. So we were trying to find our life purpose, like why I'm standing on this solid earth, and here above, planets are revolving. So what does it say for me?
Absolutely. And it coincided, it's rather fortunately for me, it coincided with my having sort of mastered the subject in a way. I mean, you never really master astrology. You're always learning. And by the way, if anybody's practicing like solar arc directions or secondary progressions or interested in midpoints and things like that, you can adapt Draconic to those systems if you wish.
I even do horary chart.
Sorry?
I even do horary.
I've never done that, actually. I'm actually learning horary with Deborah Halding shortly, because
Okay.
I've tended to avoid horary because it was a bit too magical. But I've seen so many good horaries that I think I'm missing a trick. You're never too old. You're never too old, Sherry. See, even a fossil like me still has to learn.
I really like you, Oliver.
So yeah, so I suppose I brought that point in because you can actually, because it's quite straightforward, but you will know this, Sherry, that there's a strong discipline to the interpretation. And if I can get that sense across today by looking at your chart and the Queen's chart, if we've got time to do that, obviously not everyone's going to remember everything. Obviously you should read my book, or at least consult you. I mean, I'm sure you teach Draconic too, or
yeah.
So one runs, because the big problem I've noticed this over and over again is that people would treat the Draconic chart as if it's a vernal chart, when really you're looking for themes which are much more to do with the emotions, with the memory, and also the higher vibration.
Exactly.
I know that sounds spiritualistic, but that's really it, isn't it?
I think we are all spiritualists in a way or another, but we need to remember that we are living on Earth.
I totally agree with you. And I mean, I do have a problem with astrologers who get so refined that you don't really know how that connects to real life. And another thing that I'm very, this is an ethical thing that I think that you would agree with this, is that we've got to be very responsible in the advice that we give to clients.
Exactly.
And if the client leaves your company feeling depressed, deflated, and doomed, you have failed as an astrologer. Because the certainties that some people bring to the chart is inappropriate. The chart is not a scientific object, it's a symbol. It's a multifaceted symbol, and we are mere humble interpreters.
Yeah, exactly. And each symbol has a very deep meaning, connects us to our actual human side.
There is absolutely truth in that. There is no such thing as a boring person. There is no such thing as a boring life. There is no such thing as a purposeless life. You can have a life that seems purposeless because it's wandering and roaming, but there's your purpose.
Yeah.
And so I always encourage students and people who are interested in the subject, try to set aside the judgmentalism, try to throw the boxes out the window, and just treat each person as an extraordinary singularity.
Yeah.
Because each horoscope is a singularity. And that approach will help you with the Draconic analysis, because you're understanding, yes, you've got your life on Earth, but there's also that higher consciousness where you can be so much more yourself.
Yeah.
And what we try to do as an astrologer is, if there's any doubt, you help guide them towards that awareness.
Exactly. A few things that I would like to add, that first, when I teach Draconic, people usually come with the expectations that they will be discovering their past lives.
Oh, yes, the past life.
However, I think we should remember that we are already those past lives. Don't forget about the past, but focus on your soul purpose today.
It's a very interesting point. It's in my book. I mean, I'm surrounded by reincarnationists, by the way. I mean, apparently I'm an ancient Roman soldier. And I remember a clairvoyant saying that I was a dandy in Louis XV's court. The point you're making is a very interesting one. You see, some systems of astrology are built around reincarnation. The danger, of course, is you get into fantastic narratives.
Yeah.
And another way of looking at the South Node, because that's the starting point for this. Some people think the South Node is the symbol of the past lives. It might be better to say that it's a symbol of the things we're born with or our default characteristics or talents. Yeah. In other words, the South Node is not necessarily a bad place because it may be where our talents are.
Yeah. And maybe we should use them.
And maybe, well, invariably we do.
I should use them. You should use them. Everyone should. You can delete your characteristics.
Yes. I mean,
you shouldn't. Just embrace it, actually.
Well, it's all part of the South Node. You're not going to, I mean, if we go towards the North Node and the challenges to come, they're not going to be challenges if you don't understand where you're coming from.
Yeah.
And therefore, I've read so much nonsense about the South. I mean, I do understand and appreciate that planets close to the South Node may refer to certain problems in getting yourself into the light. I mean, it's interesting in your case, from memory, because you've got your North Node in Aquarius, is that right? I'm going for memory. Yeah. Yes, that's right. So the Sun disposits your South Node.
Yeah.
In Leo. So that might tell me, aside from the Sun conjunction, that might tell me that there may have been a struggle to get into the light, to allow the real Shira to come out into the light.
This is the real thing about me, actually. I have a very hard shell that I need to break. But I'm trying, I'm working on it, using my Leo side from time to time.
Exactly. And I mean, for me, yes, it's a narrative South to North Node. But you're not going to erase the South Node, because if you do, you won't know what you've gained from the North Node.
Yeah.
So there's so much idiotic stuff out there. It's unbelievable. But never mind. That's the way it is. And oh, by the way, I'm not very tactful. Aquarius rising.
I'm Draconic Aquarius rising.
Oh, there you go. There's a lot of abundant Aquarius energy here today. Although, funny enough, I'm a Sun Gemini. That may not surprise you. But draconically, I'm Libra. So that tells me something about the challenges. I'm still going to be a Gemini, but I've got to work on the social side as well. And of course, when you've got Venus exactly opposite your Sun,
I don't accept
Saturn actually, Venus opposite Saturn, actually, that's what I really meant. But that's a further indication. This is a good example of what I mean about nuances in the draconic thing. It's a suggestion, you stay the Gemini. I'm not going to become a Libran, but taking the Libran energy and allowing myself to like people more. And that's been the theme of my life. I was a raving sociopath when I was quite young.
Yeah.
I think I like people a bit more now.
Okay.
I've learned to be more appreciative of people, but that's been a running lesson in my, and of course, when we're talking about draconic purposes, it's not like fortune cookies with little one-liners.
Yeah.
Go forth and multiply. It's actually layered. So certain very major challenges, such as, for example, to find one's own light, to shine, to have confidence in one's passion, may also be part of a psychological journey as well, or certain emotional challenges that one has to face. I'm not suggesting that with you necessarily, but that what I have found that the purposes tend to interlink in a layered sort of way.
Actually, I was just checking the questions. I have seen one. How can we interpret the current soul without knowing past lives?
Well, the trouble is we don't know our past lives.
Yeah.
We can speculate about them.
Yeah.
We have, some people say they have memories. Well, it could be that they saw a movie 40 years ago and they now think they're Cleopatra. I'm not trying to be facetious, and I understand that that's a serious question. Remember that when we look at the chart, the only thing we've got to go by are symbols.
Yeah.
And it's probably a good idea not to turn those symbols into movies.
Yeah.
And you can look, for example, you could say, what does it mean to have the South Node in Taurus, for example? That might indicate that there's a tendency within the nature as a default characteristic to look for stability or to not to take risks.
Yeah.
And maybe to think that the certainties of life revolve around comfort and things like that. Because the opposite is Scorpio, which is another area, another territory, which accepts the notion of things ending in order for things to start. Now, in order to understand that South Node in Taurus, we didn't have to cook up a story about where we came from.
Yeah.
Because we have to
Maybe
face the fact.
I can speculate that if you have South Node in
Leo,
Scorpio, that you might have been a soldier. It's easy to speculate, but it's not helping people. It's not helping people to find their soul purposes.
No. And
knowledge should be practical, and you should be able to use it for your own good.
Absolutely. And what we try to do as astrologers is to refine that symbol to understand that we're not talking about a literal narrative, that we are trying to take the energy from the symbols and trying to relate it, the abstract to the particular, so that we can identify certain essential energies that we need to address within the self.
Yeah.
And I agree with you, Shira, that it may help some people to think that they were a soldier or a nurse or whatever, if they need to find actors in their imagination. But you see, the problem with that is that it doesn't necessarily tell you anything about the nature of your life. Just to say you were a nurse or a doctor doesn't tell you anything.
Yeah.
It may tell you that you know a lot about medicine, but that it still doesn't actually have anything to do with essential traits and characteristics.
Exactly. So I think it's very nice that we are having the same page.
We are on the same page so far.
Yeah.
It may not last. Is there anything else you wanted to ask me from viewers?
Sorry?
Because I was wondering if you wanted to look at the charts or whether you want to leave.
Sure. Sure.
Because I've got to test this as well.
Meanwhile, I have a question for you. But sometimes I think that Draconic is like a tropical fruit.
Oh, that's a good
When
one.
you peel off, you will have the taste.
I like it.
Tropical fruits.
Why not?
Right?
Can you see my share?
Not at the moment.
Okay, I'm going to get rid of that then. Oh, it says the host has disabled the screen sharing.
Oh, it's my bad.
Right.
Okay. Okay. I've looked at it. I'm coming.
Fortunately.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Shall I try it again?
Such an amateur. Okay.
Because if we can't look at the charts, I can talk about your chart and the Queen's chart.
Okay, just I will be handling that. Meantime.
But the interesting thing about the Queen, it's quite amazing. What I've discovered about all the royal family is how Neptune is conjunct the Sun or other key planets within the tropical chart. And you could say, well, what's that got to do with anything? If you think about the royal family, the Queen, there is a mystique associated with the late Queen. Prince Charles has got, King Charles has got it too. So there is this kind of strange lack of clarity about what exactly the king or queen is. It's a mystery. It's even mysterious as to why they should be there at all. And it goes to the heart of a certain mystique that's actually indicated in the Draconic chart. That's part of it. But even better than that, when you look at the Queen's chart and the Draconic chart for the UK, the two suns are on the same spot in Capricorn. I think the 10th degree from memory. And that to me is one of the most extraordinary demonstrations of how Draconic can bring to life something that's not absolutely apparent in the tropical charts. Do you want me to see if I can share the screen again?
Yes, I think you can screen share.
Yes, I can do it now. Yeah. I'll just bring up the...
I did it with my magical hands.
You did it brilliantly, Shira. I mean, you only did that to get us nervous. That's the only reason. I'll put that there. I'll see if I can broaden up. Can I just do something with this screen? Yeah. I'm just going to try and get rid of that margin on the left. There. Okay. That's a bit better. Now, I'm not going to go through all my charts. You just have to pretend that you're not looking at this. Oh, there's my book again. I don't know whether I mentioned it to you.
I will be linking the Amazon.
Okay. So there we are. There's the nodes, blah, 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 blah. Let's get to the charts. Let's go to your chart first. Britney Spears, that's a fascinating chart. Oh, wait a minute. I think I've missed it. Oh, yeah, there's your chart. So this is Shira's birthday chart. So we talked earlier about the three-step process in analyzing the in bringing the Draconic analysis, and this is Shira's tropical birth chart. I've excluded the birth data, but as you can see, we've got that coronavirus style fabulous Capricorn stellium.
That will help me go viral.
I'm only teasing, but also, of course, we also have the North Node and Sun in Aquarius, and of course, in old astrology, Saturn rules that sign as well. Although I prefer Uranus, to be honest with you, and I'm intrigued by the Scorpionic energy up in the 10th, 11th houses. That to me is quite interesting. I don't know whether you use Black Moon Lilith, Shira.
I use, yeah.
Isn't it interesting? I mean, I would connect to Pluto. I mean, it's a bit wide, but it's very interesting. I think it goes to something about you, a questing. It's a power thing, trying to uncover that which is that's concealing and therefore holding you down. And I think that's quite an interesting energy because it's part of your life purpose. But just to go into the analysis very quickly, I always look at the moon phase, and Shira has a first quarter moon, which actually builds up the compassion, but it also makes her very highly determined, but also prepared to jumpstart things as well. It's highly cardinal, so you really are a natural manager. You're going to be initiating. That's reflected by the hemispheric bias towards the eastern side.
Like initiation is the easiest thing for me.
Hence this live stream video. Hence this live streaming. I mean, you're going to have your own channel before you know it. Yeah. And we mentioned already, you'll see that the North Node is down in the only using the equal second house. It's bang on, almost bang on Shira's sun. So that tells me immediately, even before we get to the Draconic, that you're a natural star in the making.
Okay.
But you have to kind of shine in your destiny. And that's replicated by, and I mentioned this earlier, by the fact that the South Node, our starting point, is in Leo. I mean, some people would say, oh, you come from a regal background. Perhaps you're an empress in a previous life. But it would be better to say in Draconic terms that because the sun is dispositing the South Node, that it's more likely that association that the light was suppressed. If you want to talk about a past life, you could say that the life was suppressed by responsibilities or by authority,
Yeah.
But you can go into it, but you could also say you started out in life reluctant to shine, or nervous of being shy, and nervous of being, out there, showcasing your own talents or whatever.
Yeah.
So that's you don't actually have to get into a storyboard narrative of past lives to understand the essence of that, which is the suppression of the self as a starting point.
Exactly.
Yeah. Now, we mentioned that there's no fire in this chart, and that therefore makes it the most important element. You'll see the importance of this in a moment. Shall we move to the Draconic chart?
Sure.
So this is the Draconic chart. So Aquarius is now rising, which is interesting, which moves the whole thing to the greater emphasis on independence as well. I mean, these notes I've got there, they're not complete. They're just little prompts for me to remember, so that I don't keep saying, where's the moon? Where's the moon? It's very interesting. I mean, a tropical moon was in Cancer, which is dignified. It's a very strong position, very compassionate nature. But the shift to Leo doesn't mean that you should suddenly become all selfish and notice me. It simply emphasizes the need for the self to be satisfied. In other words, I'm almost tempted to say to you, embrace your inner selfishness. Not really. But it's like you need to respect what you're about more as against the group.
Yep, sometimes you have to do it.
Especially if you're trying to break new ground. And it's very interesting, of course, that's emphasized by the fact, if you look down in the second house, we now have the North Node and the Sun right at the start of Aries. And that tells me immediately that it is in your essence of the life challenge to pioneer.
It's always been like this for me, all my life.
Well, then your chart's agreeing with you.
I have the itch to pioneer.
Well, and that's part. The thing is, because you're probably very attuned to yourself, understanding your life purpose has not necessarily been a big challenge. For some people, for me, it was a huge challenge, because it meant that I had to do things I seriously didn't want to do, like people. I saw the monsters.
We all have that phase, actually.
Possibly. But the thing is to be particular about it. It's also very interesting that it's in the second house, which is not just the house of material value, but the house of values, moral values and things like that. So there is going to be quite a big theme with that in your life, if it's not already, about what is right and wrong. Not moralistically, but that you're standing on your principles. And that's where the second house can be quite interesting.
Yeah, I live for my principles, actually. I'm such a stubborn.
Well, you don't need a draconic.
Mountain goats.
You have already achieved your. But it's interesting, you're talking about Pisces. You know, all that Capricorn energy in the first house is now converted to Pisces. That doesn't mean you become a Piscean, but it does mean that whereas Capricorn, of course, is pragmatic, managerial, hierarchical, ambitious, all that stuff. Pisces is always reaching beyond those normal boxes and barriers. And in spiritual terms, it's the heightening. And you can call it spirituality if you want it, or transcendentalism, choose your words.
Yeah.
But it's like encouraging you to elevate that wonderful, practical, cardinal energy into something that also can go beyond barriers, the imagination, the liminal, the spiritual.
Yeah.
It's easy. This is so easy. It's sad.
Having those mutable energy on cardinal energy is very actually progressive. Yes, very progressive.
And I wanted to say something else. Of course, I missed out the other big conjunction, your Jupiter on the moon. It's an amazing conjunction. And that to me also speaks of a teacher guru.
Okay.
And if you have any doubts about it, isn't it strange that the sign that Jupiter presides over, Sagittarius, takes in your midheaven and Black Moon Lilith?
Yeah.
In the 10th house. So there's something about teaching, being a guru. I mean, I don't like the word guru.
Yeah, I don't like it either.
I mean, you may start wearing a ponytail if you're not careful.
Maybe.
I've noticed that ponytails and gurus go together. But it's very strongly emphasized. It's not just about teaching in a classroom. This is about publishing. This is about having a wide influence through dissemination.
Mm-hmm.
So I suspect, I don't know where you are at the moment in your practice, but I suspect that books or higher education or something of that sort will play a huge part in
I am working on one.
In other words, you're working towards your Draconic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Now, that's the second part. And you'll see that we looked at the modalities, we've looked at the elements, we've seen that fixed energy is elevated. So she has to show, it doesn't mean that she becomes less cardinal. That's not possible because it's written in her tropical chart. But the fixed energy is a hint to me that it may be a bit of a struggle. You may know of certain things, but you're fighting against the grain a lot.
Yeah.
Because it requires determination and perseverance, and you don't need those if it's going to be an easy ride.
Yeah, exactly. And
you've got a few, you've got a few
halfway
challenges in the chart, but the squares and all the fixity build up the muscle. Now, we've done the first part, we've done the second part. Let's do the third part now. Now, this is the wonderful synastry of the self. I notice another astrologer has just pinched that phrase from me, but I won't name them. I don't want to be controversial. So there's a lot going on here, but I mentioned earlier to you that there's an indication in your chart that astrology could be the thing that taps your inner passion. We've got a lot of energy going between the 2nd and the 8th houses.
Yeah.
Which is to do values, but also transformation. So we see a very strongly transformative purpose in your life direction. You're changing other people's lives as well as embracing endings and beginnings in yourself as a dynamic of self-improvement. But look,
I like to pave the path for people.
Yes, well, that's transformation.
Yeah.
And if you're doing it right, which you clearly are, you are going to make a difference, even though you're not ordering them, you're not being the guru as such in the sense of telling them the way. What you're saying is, because I think a lot of recognition is involved. The client, if they're halfway aware, will recognize the truth as you're speaking.
Mm-hmm.
But I just want to say this, isn't it interesting if you go down into the 2nd house, that that you've got this association with Uranus.
Yeah.
Which of course in modern astrology is associated with astrology.
Yeah.
But it's interesting to me that this is why I love the equal house, you see, because it's so flexible. It's taking in the intellectual energy of Aquarius, which is essentially a mental sign, isn't it? Mm-hmm. And Pisces, which is essentially an empathetic, emotional, watery sign. And you are being invited to become a very wet intellectual.
Yeah.
It's very interesting to me that so much energy, because you basically got, it wouldn't be correct to call that entirely stellium because it's out of sign, but I would call that an out of sign stellium. And it's fascinating to me that the North Node and the Sun in your tropical chart is embracing the intellectual and spiritual energies of Aquarius and Pisces.
Yeah, I might agree with that.
And the other thing that interests me,
logic and reasoning is always a bit higher.
Well, we won't argue about the height of things, but I suppose what we're trying to say is that to make a delicious cake, you need to have all the ingredients working together. And I think it sort of was indicated in the earlier part of this analysis of the shift to independence, which I think has a lot to do with your personal progress. But then there's the higher message coming in that you become even more effective by embracing certain, it doesn't even have to be a religion or a mystical thing, nothing like that. It's much more about a sense of understanding that borders and barriers are suddenly can be quite illusory.
Yeah.
That greater truths can be found by mixing and matching, by blending, or by reaching up to higher consciousness, things like that. I know it sounds a little bit spiritual, but there's no doubt that Pisces in its best manifestation takes us beyond the rational intellect, even though you're not going to be much of an astrologer without a rational intellect. Because in the end, if you think about it, the horoscope is a creature of mathematics.
Yeah.
But the other thing I just wanted to say to you, because I think this is a very significant indicator about, you know, we said we picked up on your Scorpio, Pluto and Lilith, and that's quite a crunchy mix, that.
Yeah.
And it's very interesting now that it's taken to the 12th house, which is the zone of the liminal, the zone of the spiritual, or that which is beyond the rational. It can be an area of chaos as well, but it doesn't have to be. I mean, some idiots talk it this place of undoing. Well, that's a ridiculous thing to say. But isn't it interesting that I didn't say idiots? You only imagined that I said that. But I find it very interesting that that Pluto, which very, very weakly takes in Lilith draconically, but it's still there out of sign, is bang into the Mars and the Uranus. Well, forget about Neptune for now. But that's so there's something of the warrior about you. I see you fighting for something, fighting to unveil, fighting to disclose, and all based on quite high principles, being in Capricorn.
If I believe that something is right, I will fight for it.
Exactly. But I think that when you see it this much, and I always associate the 12th house with great power, because when you look at the politicians' charts, they often have the sun in the 12th house. There's often a lot of activity in the 12th house. So it's ridiculous to dismiss the 12th house as some weakling cadent house. It's ridiculous. It's just, it's another zone within our own experience, within our own nature. But to have that shifted to your 12th house marks, as part of your soul purpose, some considerable challenge to get the message across.
Yeah.
So good luck with that.
I need to deliver this message.
And of course, it's opposed by all this stuff in Cancer. Well, I wouldn't worry too much about that. What I've noticed about the Draconic oppositions is that it's an invitation to bring in all the different energies. So that tells me that you're encouraged not only to, in a sense, be impersonal in your analysis of certain things, but also not to lose your heart, not to lose that nurturing, caring, compassionate, because that's the motivation.
Yes, exactly. That's
but
really
it may come out looking a bit different.
Yeah.
But the underlying motivation is, and we would start in the 6th because it's lower down than the 12th. It's as simple as that. But there are a lot of other things I could say about that. But for the purposes of this conversation, that's it. Can I just quickly show you?
Show me.
A minute. I'm just trying to remember where it is. Yeah. Oh, that's it. So just very quickly, I won't go through this the way I did with your chart. This is Queen Elizabeth II's tropical chart. I'm sure you're familiar with it.
I know this chart very well.
Yeah, and it does speak of the queens. You've got the sun down in the 4th house, the land. You've got Capricorn rising. Where's her Saturn? Oh, it's to the midheaven. Oh, yeah, right. I mean, it's all there. And just in case you didn't realize it, but she's got all the royal sign around the 7th and the 8th houses. So it's actually quite descriptive of the woman that we knew as the queen. This is the Draconic version. What's interesting is that what it's doing is that it's emphasizing, it's italicizing. So whereas she's got the sun in Taurus in the tropical chart, in the Draconic chart, which is about the purpose, suddenly the sun is in Capricorn, which of course is the sign of government and of monarchy.
Yeah.
And it's in the 4th house, the house of the land. Of course, it's not changed house, but it's a furtherance of the message. It's telling us something a bit more about the queen, what her sole purpose is. And it's interesting that she's got Libra rising. Well, what did she do all the time but shake people's hands? I mean, and she's got, where's the Venus? That's in Scorpio. There's I would say that she had strong convictions. I think that she was symbolic of convictions. whether I'm not making moral judgments about her. I mean, I'm talking about the way she was perceived, the symbolism.
Mhm.
And then just quick, I've got to show you two more charts very quickly. I said to you earlier about the royal family and Neptune, and we see, if you look down in the fourth house, Neptune is now very closely conjunct the sun. And, it just demonstrates, and Charles has got something similar. I can't remember whether it's the sun or the moon. I can't remember from memory. But Neptune is very significant in his chart too, as well as in, I think, Prince Harry's. But Neptune is the planet of mystique. It can be the planet of confusion, but it's also the planet of glamour and mystique. And there is an essential ambiguity about why they're there and what exactly they do. But they do something, even though we don't know what it is much. They just turn up. But let me tell you the pièce de résistance. I said earlier, and I think you agreed, we're talking about the big news in the analysis. What's the big news? Well, when you actually look at the Queen's tropical chart, that's the inner wheel, by the way, and then you take the Draconic chart for, oh no, is that the one? Yes, sorry, I confused myself. The inner chart is actually the UK chart. It's the 1801 chart. And that's the tropical version. The outer wheel is Queen Elizabeth's Draconic chart. In other words, what is her life purpose in relation to the nation? What do we see?
Just looking at
Isn't that amazing?
Great conjunction with Saturn and Jupiter.
Just out by 5 minutes. I'm looking at the two suns at the moment.
Okay.
And that, to me, is the identity of the self with the identity of the country. Because in British terms, remember, you've got to take the constitutional symbolism that she's the head of state, or was the head of state. So it's very, and given that she was queen for so long, it's very interesting to see that close connection. What was the aspect that you mentioned, Shira?
Saturn-Jupiter conjunction.
Yes, that's
in
Leo, in the 10th house.
Yeah.
It's amazing, isn't it?
Yeah.
And also close to the midheaven, so it's her career as well.
Yeah.
Life direction. So this, some people looking at this say, well, we know this. Well, when you go back to the Queen's tropical chart, it's not immediately obvious. If we just go back to it very quickly.
She's queen for a reason.
She's queen for the reason. But the Draconic chart will illustrate precisely what she's representing. So we have certain indications with the Saturn next to MC, but that doesn't necessarily tell us exactly what it could suggest that she's a managerial type person, could be a bank manager. But it's only when you get to the Draconics that you get the furtherance of the message. Neptune in the tropical and the Draconic analysis, and then this amazing, as you've pointed out yourself, Saturn on Jupiter, government power, growth, that sort of thing, expansion and glory, munificence, all that stuff.
Solid glory, actually.
And disposited by the sun, which is in a very close conjunction only 5 minutes out, in Capricorn, in the 4th house, which is the house of the land and the people.
Yeah.
So that's, from a chart point of view, that's it.
There is nothing mystical, right?
There's nothing mystical except, how did this happen? Why do these symbols speak so literally?
Yeah. How it becomes like a new technique rather than a new zodiac. Yeah, I can understand that it's like a new zodiac. Yeah. However, it's rather an ephemeral issue.
Yes.
In a way. Just take your North Node to 0 areas and you will be shocked about your own nature.
You will be shocked. And
I got shocked when I saw that Pisces.
Well, I know that's going to offend your Aquarian sensibility, you see. Because maybe you're afraid that you're going into a kind of slack area where there's no definition.
Yeah.
That's the challenge you're going to face. And I'll tell you something, and I only say this as a thought, is that astrology in its essence cannot be packaged as a science. This is where a lot of people start screaming at me. How can you turn ancient divinatory symbols into a science?
It's not a science, definitely. However,
Stop the share. I'm going to stop the share. There we go. So I can see you again.
Okay. I agree that it's not a science, but it's a fact that it's working. It's a factual thing that we all know that sun, when it comes to 0 areas, it will be spring. And each year, every other planet has a different orbit, different speed, and it's part of time. So we are just getting a timestamp from a certain point from time, and we are interpreting, and we are having another layer with Draconic zodiac, actually, to figure out our soul purpose.
Yes. Even though we don't know what the soul is.
Yeah.
I sometimes, if people get upset about the word soul, I say life purpose, but that can sound like career. See, and I think soul, I mean, in my book, I don't actually subscribe to any definition of soul, but I draw on different interpretations from philosophers, from religious leaders, from atheists, scientists, you know, and they're all going in the same direction. They're trying to describe a void, which we may feel. But I think there's a natural barrier, rather like with past lives. You cannot go beyond that barrier without inventing a narrative. And I think as astrologers, it's better to, I mean, I would advise people not to.
I wouldn't do it. I'm not a supporter for the narrative. But the thing is, we all have, okay, we don't know what is our soul, what was happening on our past lives, but we know what we can do in this present life. We can try to understand our present life, present day. I think it will be much easier for everyone to understand better, and it shouldn't be complicated. It should be simple, understandable for everyone, and everyone can make a use of it. Absolutely. To fix their lives.
Absolutely. But it carries with great responsibility if you're dealing with clients, because it's quite a sacred thing when you're looking into the innards of their life. And astrology allows us to do that for reasons that we don't entirely understand.
Yeah, I'm just checking our questions. Do we have any questions? No, but not at the moment. We don't have any. But are we done, or shall we continue?
It's your show. But
I think I would like to add on Draconic that if you try to understand the soul purpose thing, because it's a wide issue, and there is like past life people, reincarnation believers, whatever you do just fix your time, align your main time, actually, mean time, sorry, which is restored in your tropical and draconic chart. Make a use and go for it. It's not a hidden knowledge. It's a clear one.
It's very straightforward, provided you understand, you being anybody, that the Draconic chart does invite a more nuanced approach, because it's not a sun-based chart, as you know.
Yeah.
We are dealing with much more emotional matters, and I know some astrologers microanalyze the Draconic chart. Well, you can do that if you want, but you're most likely confuse yourself in the process if you're trying to distill 3 or 4 soul purposes, which may be interlinked between the psychological, the emotional, and then that sense of drive to do something, whatever that may be. Incidentally, people may be surprised that you can make forecasts with Draconic. I mean, Donald Trump, the last time that he tried to be president, I was asked by a magazine to write a long essay about whether he was likely to be re-elected. And I thought, I don't need 3,000 words. I'll give you 30 words because I drew up the Draconic analysis for him, which is quite interesting because it pinpoints all the litigation he's going through at the moment with Pluto down in the, he's got the Mars in the 7th house, all that. But what was interesting to me, for his solar return for that relevant year of the election, Aries completely dominated the 10th and the 11th houses in the
Draconic solar return, right?
Yeah. When you look at the tropical, remember it's the Draconic solar return, and the 11th house. Now, it's just telling me that it's streaming live on YouTube. I've got a message saying it's leaving stuff. But just to point, now this is an example of a Draconic interpretation. If you think about what Aries is, it's the place where we start something. So if you're seeking re-election, you don't go for Aries because you're asking for the same thing again. So based on that, I just simply said, there's no way he's getting re-elected with all that Aries in his, and but is that it? Don't you want to do the midpoint? Don't you? No, because that told me in just a few words, just a few, that's it.
I don't need the rest of the story. It's just 10 words.
And I said he's going to have a lot of trouble ahead of him. He's got Mars in the 10th house, in the 7th house. Pluto's doing something naughty with Jupiter down in the 5th. And I said he's going to be facing a lot of litigation and lawsuits. Now, some people say, well, he has all his life. I think we must admit that, I mean, it's quite interesting what's happening with him at the moment. I've not done the solar return for the next election yet. But I'd be very surprised if I know at the moment it's looking like he may become the Republican candidate. We don't know. But I'm only giving that as and also I did a Draconic analysis of a pharmaceutical company. And if you look at the tropical pharmaceutical company, I won't go into this too much, but just to give you a glimpse, I can share the charts with you afterwards, actually. But when you actually look at the tropical chart, it's all Capricorn up in the 9th house. That doesn't tell you what it's about. But when you look at the Draconic chart, all those planets shift to the 6th house, which is where you would expect it to be because it's about healthcare. So this is another example of the literalness of the Draconic. But you know that.
Yeah, I know it. Draconic has never ceased to amaze me. I'm always using it as a second tool in my consultancies to confirm it to myself. If I do just a horror chart, what does this client needs from me? And open it in Draconic zodiac because it's the purpose.
Do you start with the tropical or do you go straight to the Draconic?
When I analyze?
Yes.
First tropical, then Draconic alone, then synastry between.
Oh, that's very interesting. Well, you're opening up another door for me because I mean, I can do a horary. I don't want to suggest that I don't. It's just that I want to be versed in it, Deborah Halding wise. I want to, because she's the best in the field, isn't she?
Yeah.
So once I've done that, I think I'm going to start doing that. I shall see how it works.
Yeah. Just try it. It works amazing.
Wonderful. Wonderful. Well, I hope you're right about all this.
Just check it. And I'm waiting for your feedback.
Well, anyway, I think I'm sort of done, unless you want to talk about anything else on the Draconic.
I'm done as well.
I think we've introduced the subject pretty well.
Yeah, I think so.
I
think so.
And I hope that we've whetted people's appetites. But it's been such a pleasure to meet you. I see you on Instagram a lot.
Yeah.
And I think you should have your own TV channel. And
job starting.
well, you're going in the right direction anyway. And yeah, and I hope that we can stay in touch, you know, because, you know.
Yeah, we are always in touch. Just checking one question. Draconic chart can be used for prediction as well as find our life purpose, isn't it?
Well, it's the life purpose for the natal chart when you're looking at the nativity. But you can actually make forecasts because what you're doing is pointing to the essential message. So you deduct the message. So going back to Donald Trump, I'm not saying, oh, his Mars was over here and his Jupiter. What I say is there was this slab of Aries cutting across his 10th and 11th houses. Mm-hmm. So it was a deduction. How is he going to be re-elected if he's starting on a new voyage in his life? It doesn't make any sense.
If it was Leo.
Oh, look, different. That's different. If it was Capricorn even. Yeah. But Aries is the start of the zodiac. It's the start of life. It's spring. Sorry about that, Australia. But in astrological terms, it is. So now you may say that's very simplistic, but actually there's no harm in it. And over again, if you look at this pharmaceutical company, for example, I was able to forecast the outcome of that by a deduction. Mm-hmm. So it works a little differently from the way it does, say, in a tropical forecast. But you have to immerse yourself in the system first to get very familiar with it, to get comfortable about moon-based charts as against sun-based charts. And once you've got it, and then you begin to understand that there is a level of literalness that is sometimes quite confounding.
Exactly.
Britney Spears, I did the same thing there. It's amazing how the chart demonstrates in the Draconic the struggle with the father and with authority, and that it's her life purpose to find her independence. I don't know whether she's going to succeed, but that's her big, like, to break away from.
Yeah, I think Britney needs to be free.
Yes, that's exactly it. And the father, there's a mutual reception, I think, from memory again, Sun and Saturn. But unfortunately, Pluto's right next to her Saturn. So that complicates it. It brings the power issues into it. And I'm sure there's much more to that story that we can't really go into for legal reasons. But I'm sure there's much more to be revealed about that. And but only when you do the Draconic synastry do you see the big message to be free, to find her own life, to reinvent her own family, and all the rest of it. You know?
Let's say, leave Britney alone.
Maybe if she stopped posting so many nude pictures on Instagram, but she can do that if she wants to.
I like your celebrity moments.
Well, I was a showbiz journalist. I went to the Cannes Film Festival for years. I've interviewed just about every celebrity on the. I interviewed Elizabeth Taylor 3 times. A complete nightmare, Pisces. Nightmare. She couldn't tell the truth if she sat on it.
Okay, so you interviewed Taylor, and I interviewed you.
Well, there's a connection. You're a great interviewer. And I think it'd be more of a conversation than an interview, really, because we've shared different thoughts. And of course, I've got the greatest respect for your great knowledge. And it's been an honor to be interviewed by you.
Oh, thank you.
Have a conversation with you.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you for joining. Thank you, people, for joining. I just read their nice messages. And I'm so happy that it's my live stream and it was with you.
Well, it's been a great honor. And I'm sure there'll be many more great shows to come. Wish you very well with it. Wish you very well with it.
Are you joining the conference on October?
The Astrological Association. Yeah. Yes, I'll be going up there as editor. I'm not actually taking part in it this year. Mm-hmm. I did the plenary opener last year, and I think the world needs a rest from me. But will you be physically up there, or are you going by Zoom?
Yeah, probably.
Or maybe we'll
I'm
meet.
planning.
It's up in Staffordshire, which I know very well. because I was a student there 500 years ago. One of my past lives. But yeah, so we may meet in October.
Yeah.
I'm expected to
If
be
not,
there.
just come to Turkey.
Well, do you know, I was a travel writer for years, and I spent 3 weeks in Turkey, and it was the most wonderful experience. You know, we traveled all over the place, went to these cave churches and things like that.
Oh yeah.
And I didn't realize it's a meeting point of Islam and Christianity. It's just amazing. So I love Turkey.
We love you.
And
see you another next time, maybe.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.